Okay. So the other, I've introduced Sarah Malloy and Bailey Cervase who are helping us out here today. And I'm just, for my part, I'm Terry Nichols. A lot of you, in fact, I'm going to say most of you, I don't know. I'm with the Montana Watershed Coordination Council, and MWCC, also known as MWCC. And MWCC's mission is to unite and support Montana's community-based conservation networks to promote healthy and productive watersheds. And so this conversation really started with conversations with our local partners in Carbon, Park, and Stillwater counties, local conservation organizations, just asking them what might be helpful for them in terms of more medium and long-term flood recovery. We are not a disaster response nonprofit. We're a local conservation-based nonprofit. So really just reaching out to those local conservation partners, asking them what would be most helpful to them. And that's basically, this is what came out of that, just creating this space. And so the goal of this conversation is not to be a public forum or to address all the flood needs or disaster and emergency services. It's centered specifically around the needs of those local partners and the partners they work with, which include all of you, right? And so specifically, this was in the email, but I'm just gonna state it so we're all on the same page. The goal of this event is to provide a space for conservation organizations and others involved in flood recovery in Carbon, Park, and Stillwater counties to share with one another their flood recovery and response experiences so far, including lessons learned that might be valuable to others in the room. To express their needs for medium and long-term flood recovery and restoration assistance to a listening audience of agencies and funders, and to improve communications among community leaders, funders, and agencies moving forward. So with that stated, does anybody have any questions about that or the goals of the meeting or anything before we have some introductions? Okay. Then yeah, let's just go around. If everybody just really briefly, just state your name, what organization you're representing, and if you are a local, like a community-based partner, what community or watershed you're representing. And I think let's start with Sarah and Bailey, and then I'll call on people because that'll probably be the easiest, but Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. Nice to see you all here. I'd encourage you, if you're willing, to turn your camera on too. I thought I would mention that just because we won't be having slides or any visuals today. It's really just meant to be kind of a community discussion, albeit online. So Sarah Malloy, I'm a regional water planner with the DNRC. I'm based in Helena, but I work out of the Yellowstone River Basin. Thank you.
And Bailey?
Yeah, hi, I'm Bailey. I'm the Big Sky Watershed Corps member with the Upper Yellowstone group and the Park CD.
Okay, now I'm going to just try to go down the list here. We've got Adrienne Michelle.
Hi, it's Adrienne Michelli. I am with the FEMA integration team here in Montana, and so I actually am permanent party fed sitting here in Montana. I sit with the state disaster and emergency services staff.
Thanks. And yes, apologies in advance for mispronouncing anyone's name. And thanks for correcting me when you hop on. Ashley Lowry.
Hi, good morning. I'm Ashley Lowry, and I'm with the Park Conservation District. I'm also the watershed coordinator for the Upper Yellowstone Watershed Group and the Shields Watershed Group.
Okay, Ashley Brubaker.
Hi, I'm Ashley Brubaker. I work for Trout Unlimited. I'm the Upper Yellowstone project manager.
All right. And Brooke Millian.
Hi guys, Brooke Millian. I am with the Clarks Fork Yellowstone Partnership based out of Red Lodge, Roberts area.
Buddy Drake.
Good morning. I'm a private consultant on contract with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to do 310 inspections.
And I'll just let everybody know, Courtney from the city of Red Lodge says she doesn't have audio, but she's happy to be here. Courtney Long, the planning director. Yeah, she's Courtney Long, the planning director for the city of Red Lodge. Scott Whiteman with the USGS is also having audio issues. Hopefully everyone can at least hear. If you can't hear, message us in the chat, please. Or hopefully figure that out. Courtney, Serena.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Serena Allen, Carbon County Emergency Manager. And it must be a Monday because my camera doesn't feel like working today.
Let's see. DeWitt. Is DeWitt Dominic on? He's maybe muted. Okay. Well, we'll keep moving on and do it. If you hop on later, that's great. Greg Coleman.
Hi, Greg Coleman with Park County Emergency Management.
Jade, I think it's Metzler. I can't spell everybody's names.
Hi, yes, this is Jade Metzler. I'm with the Army Corps of Engineers. I am out of the Helena Regulatory Office.
Okay. Jason Alexander. Oh, Jason might have been one of the people whose audio wasn't working.
No, mine's fine. I think at least I can hear you. Jason Alexander, Surface Water Studies Chief, the U.S. Geological Survey, Wyoming, Montana Water Science Center.
Okay, and then I might get this one wrong, but Jaren Borrego.
Hi, I'm Jaren Borrego. I'm with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers out of the Helena office, and I'm covering Stillwater, Carbon, and Sweetgrass County for any emergency applications.
And John Lunzer.
Hi, I'm John Lunzer. I'm a hydrologist with the DNRC Water Management Bureau.
Kay Storer.
Hey, this is Keenan Storer. I'm with Montana DEQ. I'm the 318 Authorization 401 Coordinator.
Leah Schwartz or Swartz.
I'm Leah. I work with for Montana Freshwater Partners based out of Livingston. We're a small nonprofit that has been involved in the flood recovery effort here in Livingston or in Park County.
Right, Lindsay Clark.
Hi, I am Lindsay Clark. I'm coordinator for the Stillwater Valley Watershed Council based out of Absaroka, Nye, and Fishtail area.
And Tiffany Leiden.
I am Tiffany Leiden. I work with the Montana Department of Natural Resources in the floodplain program, primarily with floodplain mapping outreach.
Peter Brown.
Okay.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Peter Brown. I work with Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation based in the Park County area and the Upper Yellowstone Watershed.
Sage Joyce.
Hi, good morning. Sage Joyce. I'm the State Program Manager and Chief of the 3 regulatory offices for Army Corps of Engineers. And I sit in Helena in that office.
And then Phaedra, I think it is. She says Rita with Phaedra in parentheses. If you're trying to talk, I think you're muted. Okay, we'll move on to, Phaedra, are you there?
That actually might be me. I
yes,
misnamed. This is Jim Stevenson, and I have no idea who Rita Phaedra is. Oh my God.
I don't either.
This is truly incognito. My camera isn't working. Apologies. I'm with Clarks Fork Yellowstone Partnership with Brooke, and I like this name right now. And we're focused on Rock Creek and the Clark's Fork Yellowstone.
Got it. Glad you made, and you can change your name if you go under participants and you right click to the right of your name. There should be 3 dots and there should be an option to rename yourself.
Thank you.
If you want us all to know who you are. Scott O'Peets.
Morning, Scott Opitz, Fish, Wildlife and Parks. I'm the Livingston area fisheries biologist.
And Scott Whiteman. Scott Whiteman there and able to unmute.
I think his audio wasn't working.
Oh,
yeah.
Thanks for the reminder.
We can't hear you, Scott, so I'm not sure what's going on. As long as you can hear us, I guess I'll try to fill in.
Yeah, it looked like.
Scott is the data section chief. He's based out of Billings, but he was in Helena, Montana for a long, long time. He oversees all of our data collection efforts in Wyoming and Montana.
Thanks, Jason. And yeah, people are introducing themselves in the chat when they can't. Otherwise, turn on audio. Tracy Sears.
Good morning. I'm Tracy Sears. I am the Montana National Flood Insurance Program Coordinator. So I'm working with all the communities that have been impacted from this event. I know Stillwater County, Stephanie Ray, the planning director, and floodplain administrator wanted to attend, but she had a conflict, so I'm going to try to fill in if I can for her.
Thanks. T. Flanagan.
Hi there. Yeah, Tommy Flanagan here. I am working with Lindsay Clark and the Stillwater Valley Watershed Council, kind of brought on to volunteer and help organize a little bit of community response to kind of longer term flood recovery. So glad to be here. Thank you.
And Tom Coley.
Good morning, Tom Coley, Carbon County Emergency Management.
And last but certainly not least, Erin Wall.
Hello, I'm Erin Wall. I am one of the Arpa Grant managers at DNRC, and I'm here because I was the person that got put in charge of the Arpa flooding response irrigation grant. So yeah, thanks for having me, Terry.
Yeah, thanks to everybody for being here. Yeah, and
I might jump in. This is Wendy Weaver with Montana. With Montana Freshwater Partners. We've just been coordinating and helping lead some of the post-recovery work with the landowners in the valley.
Thank you for that reminder. Is there anybody else that I missed in that long list of participants?
Yes, Paul Sanford with the NRCS State Office in Bozeman. I'm filling in for our Emergency Watershed Program Manager, Rob Malachek. He'll be on at 11 and I'll step off the call at 11. So thank you for having us.
All right, great. Anyone else?
This is DeWitt Dominic with the Park Conservation District. And so I'm currently serving as the 310 administrator.
Great. Glad you made it. Yeah, as Sarah said earlier, if you can keep your camera on, that would be great. This really is just a conversation. There's not going to be any slides or any kind of presentation. So it'd be great to see people's faces if you're able and in a position to do that. So we're now going to move into the part of our agenda where local representatives speak to those questions that we sent out, and I'll repeat those questions first and drop them in the chat. But before I say that, we asked if possible for counties to sort of coordinate 2 people who would be able to speak for you. Have all the 3 counties been able to do that, or are you going to be doing that on the fly?
On the fly in Park County.
Okay. All right, well, hopefully that'll work out for everybody. I'm gonna send these questions to everybody here just as a reminder. So the questions, and we'll just go alphabetically. Start with Carbon County, then Park, then Stillwater. And the 3 questions that we asked you all to share, 10 minutes for each county. So we have time for more discussion at the end, but in 10 minutes total for 2 of your representatives to answer the following questions. What lessons have you learned, and what can you share that others in the room might find valuable? The next is, what are your next steps for medium and long-term recovery and restoration? And then what do you need from agencies, funders, MWCC, and any others who might help going forward? And agency funders and everybody who's not going to be speaking, please be listening to those responses. And we will, in the second half of this, ask the agency and funding people to respond to what they're hearing. So please be listening in. And next, we'll take it to Carbon County.
Okay, thank you. So again, this is Serena Allen, Carbon County Emergency Manager. I have invited my commissioners and the mayor from Red Lodge and Fromberg, but we are just all still trying to get our day-to-days back to normal and are just busy. And I know that we had a long weekend also, so a lot of us are not available, but I have my Deputy Emergency Manager, Tom Coley, on here too. And so I know he'll chime in. He was heavily involved with the flooding also. And I'm going to try to be pretty brief. I've got a cold, and the more I talk, the more I start to cough, but I'll do my best here. So in regards to the lessons learned, we've done after actions for both the Red Lodge side of the county and Fromberg, and a lot of it comes down to just having better communication between the agencies and partnerships. And and truly, I've been in emergency management for 2 years and haven't had to go through a flood yet, but just a lot of these agencies I have never heard of. I know our watershed groups are just newly forming locally, and they have reached out to us. So we've been trying to meet with them and work with them prior to the flood even. But I feel like a lesson that I have learned is that I'd really like to figure out what all agencies would potentially be involved in incidents that would affect our watersheds, and get to know them and the people and positions involved, so that when disasters like flooding and fires happen in these areas, that we don't have questions on who we can contact and who's there to help us. And I really think this needs to happen pre-incident.
Mm-hmm.
And then so in regards to our next steps for medium and long-term recovery and restoration, so we've got a little bit of everything going on, because we have public infrastructure, public lands, and then of course individual property owners that were affected. And utilizing our community foundation locally, we've been helping develop a long-term recovery group to help individual property owners and business owners, and they've developed some case management to help them. And specific to county, we are working with Army Corps of Engineers, DNRC and floodplain, our local floodplain administrator, and just partnering with everybody on who's going to fix what and how to fix it appropriately, and trying to figure out who's really in charge of taking that action on. We were declared the public assistance grant, but we want to make sure that the appropriate agency is going for that project, so that the funding is dispersed appropriately and not necessarily, double taking it on. So we'll definitely be in it for the long haul. It's going to take quite some time. Our road crews are really heavily working on the roads and the bridges that were affected. We're working with the Conservation District in Joliet in regards to irrigation ditches, and the USDA is involved. And so we're just with the long-term recovery and restoration, we're just working with all the partners to make sure that everybody's getting the proper needs that they have addressed. And then what do we need from agencies and funders and the watersheds? I don't really know how to answer that. I feel like that kind of goes along with the first question of the lessons learned is, I just feel like everybody could do, I mean, I guess that's the point of after actions, after an incident, is to take that lessons learned to improve. And I think all of us can take those lessons and try to improve. So I feel like maybe that's what's happening with your guys' agencies too. And just to keep communicating and keeping everybody involved. I feel like if you question, if you should let that person know you guys are meeting or you're moving forward with this project, that you should still let them know, even though you're not sure that they would necessarily care or it applies to them in their agency. But I feel like this was such a widespread event that everybody was affected, and that what we need here from Carbon County is just to continue the communication and just let us know what's going on so we can work together. I think our communities deserve that. And Tom Coley, hop in with anything you've got to add to that, please.
I think Serena did a good job of covering addressing most of those questions. The only thing I would add is that you have to continue that engagement with the public as well. They saw a lot of activity during the emergency work phase of the recovery, and now we've slowed down and are taking a deep breath, and we're now trying to keep that engagement going with the public so that they continue to feel that we're working towards an end goal. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Serena and Tom. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of sort of not even knowing who should be involved or who you're working with, and then that piece that you put in, Tom, about yeah, sort of taking a deep breath now and moving into that more longer term phase. So yeah, great. Thanks for sharing. Was there anybody, you've got a few minutes left in Carbon County. I mean, it sounds like you two are the representatives, but if anybody else from Carbon County wanted to add anything, you do have a few extra minutes.
Sure, Jim Stevenson here. And our watershed group, as you said, was newly formed. We were only about 6 months old when we got blessed with this flood. And what we found is, of course, there's some incredible people around us that jumped in, great agencies, and thankful for that. But being relatively lightweight still within the watershed, we decided to just focus on one relatively narrow, but I think key factor or facet of it, and that was irrigators and irrigation ditch companies. And that was because just before the flood, our CD administrator passed away, and Stillwater CD were kindly enough to stretch to capture up the CD administration for both Stillwater and Carbon County. So incredibly thankful for Sharon Flamidas. So we decided to throw in and assist her in and the two CDs in pursuing the DNRC Arpa grants. So we became collaborators on two of the grants and assessing irrigation systems damage. So Brooke Million, she's going to have a couple of words at the end of ours to tell us where we're headed next, or at least we're trying to head. A couple comments from our, speaking for the rural members that we have. Of course, everybody was just daunted by the confusion at first, and them doubly so. Our smaller ditch companies just don't have the capacity because they're thinly manned. They don't have the capacity to keep up with the information train coming at them, as well as the response that they've got. And they're distant from communications, distant from their vehicles a lot of the time. So they just fell behind, and that's a capacity issue. Then speaking from our grant recipients, so some way to, it's difficult, but it's in a rural setting to keep everyone up to speed. Speaking for our grant recipients, we were extremely pleased to be awarded to our recipients two grants, Orchard and Danford irrigation systems. They're concerned. They said, look, the two-tier award system, meaning there was the first recipients that were notified and then the second. the first tier got notification, or at least preliminary notification, very well, early, timely. It was great. The second tier, they were going, oh my gosh, this is getting late into the year. So the lack of understanding on their part and all of our part as to a two-tier system. And then speaking from non-recipients, they were like, we'd like to be in their position of getting late money because at least they're getting money. So that's that was the comments that we received from recipients. From the other end of it is much of the irrigation damage could not be assessed until after the floodwaters receded for irrigation ditches and headworks. And then a number of the funding windows were closed at that point. So yes, NRCS was in very early, and we thank them for disrupting their families and all. But in many cases, their funding window, the EWP funding window, just closed too early for some of the smaller ditches. And then the grant applications, again, came on very fast, and the lack of capacity in our area and our membership for writing grant applications, successful ones. Brooke, can you finish up for us, please?
Oh, Brooke,
you're gonna have to unmute. Can you unmute, Brooke?
There we go. I could just second what Serena and Jim have said, that from the viewpoint of our ag producers, especially, we were looking for a little more information as to what agency could do what. That communication, and as Jim said, it's hard, I know, in a rural setting to notify people of what's available. But something that would help those folks that don't know how to write grants have access to people that do know how to write grants and are willing to help. Those kind of things would be very, very helpful to us. Our watershed is new. There's only about 7 of us on the leadership team, and we've got some awesome skill sets there. But we're only 7 people, and there's a lot of folks in our drainages, both the Clarks Fork and the Rock Creek drainages, that could really use some assistance. Just doing that flood recovery.
Thanks everybody from Carbon County. And now we'll move over to Park County, again with that reminder to speak to lessons learned, things you might share with others in the room, your next steps, and what you need from agencies and funders, MWCC, anybody else. So,
yes, thank you. In terms of lessons learned, we're still, this is a little early in the process for us. I am still gathering lessons learned. We're still sort of fully involved in FEMA public assistance site visits and such. So while I'm feeling the pressure to engage in after actions, and I'm grateful for this opportunity, that we're still putting it together. But a couple to highlight right now. I think the biggest one for me personally was to pace yourself in this type of incident. You know, we're coming off of my longest incident of my career, which is a 2.5-year pandemic, and slid right into this one. I was really looking forward to a vacation after the pandemic, and the flooding threw a kink in that, which I actually ended up taking that vacation, but I used it more for recovery of myself. A week of 20+ hour days, I really pushed the body beyond its capability. And so I think the first lesson learned is that to start it off and set yourself up for a marathon, not a sprint. Volunteer coordination. While we did have plans for that through the COAD, it was still being developed. I think that needs a lot more attention in terms of coordinating community resources, and such as this group here, our watershed groups. I think there's a lot of volunteer potential there. And I think that there are networks that we have, especially in our ranching communities, where people, the neighbors helping neighbors type deal, but I'm unaware of a lot of that activity. And so from the county's perspective, we essentially created 2 lists, a list of people who wanted to help and a list of people who needed help. And the problem is that we did not have the opportunity to engage that list until it was really too late to help many of those people. And so I plan to work with our COAD, the community organizations assisting in disaster, and working on how can we, I think there's a week of people spinning up their ability to help as volunteers, just as the county is spending a week really just trying to assess what we have and where help is needed. So there's good work there for both sides to do that. Public information, I think, is key to the success of the response. And this is a lesson that we learned during the pandemic, that it's public information. It's not just a one-way street, it's a two-way street. If you're out there in the public soliciting information, what's going on, and sharing information, I think that goes a long ways in smoothing the response and understanding the needs of the community, and which allows us to be agile with our limited resources and put them where they are most needed. That's it for lessons learned. Next steps, we're currently coordinating with our stakeholders group for long-term recovery support. We're not quite sure what that looks like. We had a stakeholders group from the beginning. It was primarily for initial response at first, and then it transitioned to recovery. And then we've put that on hold as we are transitioning from our immediate recovery needs to more of a long-term posture, and what that might look like, what those needs are. And this is, we have a core group, including our community funds and a couple of volunteer organizations that were really sort of community leaders early on. We're going to meet with them later this week and decide what that long-term recovery is going to look like. I think we're going to engage all of the community organizations potentially through a survey and just sort of see what our next steps are. Right now, the ball is with the community funds. We have the Southwest Montana Flood Relief Fund that's jointly managed and administered with the Greater Gallatin United Way and the Park County Community Foundation. The United Way has case managers, and they are currently our primary effort at recovery. If somebody calls my office and says that they have an unmet need or need assistance, then I refer them to the community funds. They fill out an application, are assigned a case manager, and it goes from there. Let's see, we're also engaged with the DNRC is the sponsor for the NRCS Emergency Watershed Protection Program. We do have a couple of individuals that are in that program. I'm not sure where we are with it currently. I have an email out to Mark Bostrom with the DNRC. But that is really our primary effort for landowners, that since we're past FEMA and SBA assistance right now, that the Emergency Watershed Program is the means for private landowners to get assistance with stream bank stabilization and other needs for flood impacts directed at their property. Let's see, we're also working on a mitigation acquisition. We have in the Garden area, we lost one home to the flooding incident. There's several other homes that are at risk, and we're currently engaging with one landowner to acquire their property as a mitigation action. And then we're potentially going to offer that to a few others that have been identified. That is all based on available funding, and that's a decision made at the state level. We're also working, as I said, on the public assistance with FEMA, currently doing site visits. Our public works director is heading to Cook City tomorrow morning for a site visit. It's an 8-hour round trip ride right now to get there. So that's quite we're pretty busy with FEMA right now still. And then after that, as we're looking at next steps, then we really need to start looking at mitigation opportunities. With these disasters comes mitigation funding and opportunities. And so a couple of highlighted places in my mind is the Livingston Levy that protects downtown Livingston. And then our hospital was shut down and evacuated briefly during the incident. And I would like to explore that and make sure that doesn't happen again next time. And there are currently no unmet needs that I'm aware of. There's minor needs, but we have a number of organizations. They're all plugged in and working. And when something comes to my desk as needing attention, then I try to find a spot for it. I currently, I don't have any of those. So if anybody does know of any unmet needs, especially on the ag or conservation side, please let me know so I can at least be aware of it and help at the very least. Thank you. That's all I have.
Hey, Greg.
Thanks, Greg. This is oh, go ahead, Terry. Yeah.
Oh, no, no, actually go ahead. But I was just going to thank Greg for bringing that out, that we're all coming off of a pandemic and this has been kind of one thing on top of another, and that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And I just appreciated that. And yeah, want to thank everybody who's here for taking the time and speaking up even amidst all this. So thanks. Go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, no, I was just going to echo a lot of what Greg said. He covered a lot of ground, but just more speaking from the conservation and ranching perspective and landowners. I know, with the watershed groups and the conservation district perspective, one of the biggest lessons that we've learned is really, and everyone's mentioned it so far, is the importance of interagency and landowner coordination and the continuation of that, that has not subsided. And so that's remained one of our top goals, is even as some of the deadlines have closed for many of the larger pockets of many, trying to ensure the capacity between all partners to continue that coordinating effort, because permitting needs and calls and requests from landowners is in some ways just beginning. Like Greg mentioned, it's really starting to escalate, and that need is really growing. So one of the big lessons has been relying on our multitude of partners in the county and in the watershed to help divvy up capacity needs, and using that as a tool for coordination with landowners. And outreach has also been one of our biggest goals, of trying through meetings and through documents, coordinating or matching landowners with all the multitude of funding opportunities, and trying to fill the holes with site visits and damage assessments.
Thanks, Ashley.
Can I speak just quickly on park, since we got drawn in on this? So, one of my observations and, kind of looking at the lessons learned, and I don't think our lessons are completely learned already, at this point. We still have a long ways to go on a lot of recovery items. But one thing that really became apparent when you have a disaster of this scale, or even looking at what Florida's got going on right now, or what Kentucky had in July, it really does expose some capacity issues. And I've heard capacity mentioned many times in people's little talk here. I think that's really probably one of the things that we need to take a look at as corrective action going forward. I mean, DNRC probably wouldn't be in this position right now if there's better capacity at the conservation district level, and park DES and the park commissioners were completely overwhelmed with what they had to deal with just in response. So that became a capacity issue. And then I think Carbon and Stillwater also talked about the issues that they had at Carbon Stillwater without having an administrator there at the conservation district, and not being able to pull in and pull together kind of a cohesive unit to do even an EWPP type program. So I would say capacity is something that is really kind of, I think, come to light in this, and it helps form my opinion and vision and the legislation that I'd pull forward as I look to session. We've been hit at DNRC card by any number of things from the pandemic. We got CARES Act, and then immediately following that we got ARPA, and Erin Wall's on here. She's doing the ARPA irrigation piece. But we've got a number of other things that are still kind of hanging out there that are really stressing the capacity and ability at the state level to deploy the financial resources that are available. You know, and you do have a number of agencies coming in and coordinating. It was very, it's very good to be working as a part of an agency that does do a lot of fire work, because I think that really helped inform, you know, how DNRC is going to work in this system, you know, working with DES and working with FEMA and working with, you know, through the incident management system when we do get these disasters. But still, we even feel the capacity strain at the state level when something like this happens.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder, Mark, and we'll have more time for agency folks to speak during the open discussion too. So thanks.
Yeah, I have to take off here. I've got some other capacity issues I need to work with.
You can understand that. Yeah. Okay. Great. Moving on to Stillwater County.
Okay, sorry about that. I got to get unmuted. So I will take the lead on this. Tommy Flanagan and I are the only sole Stillwater County folks on board. So I'll start off and then Tommy's going to fill in the gaps where I missed. As far as lessons learned, there's a lot of questions still, as we all know. And one of the couple of the big ones is who is responsible for what during all of this? And who is doing what? That was a question on our end, is when we want to go in and help, we want to be a part of this, but who's doing what? What's FEMA doing? The Conservation District was very instrumental in Sharon and taking the lead on a lot of this, and doing the 310 permits and her board organizing everything. And so we were trying to just piggyback on her and what the Conservation District was already doing. But there was a lot of questions on as far as the county level, what were they doing? And then a lot of nonprofits in the area, probably at least half a dozen got on board, and we're trying to get disaster assistance for folks. And then people could apply for some money in the short term for emergency uses. But there really was no cohesive unit happening, no leadership from any one individual or organization. It was a lot of little organizations and government entities kind of seeming to do their own thing from my perspective. So I think in a lot of the lessons learned, there's a lot more to learn, as we all know, but coordination of who's doing what and getting information out to the public so that they know that something's going on, and that landowners and those that are affected by these disasters don't lose hope. In the end, talking to other organizations and other groups that were affected by floods, you know, patience is huge, and don't get in a big hurry to try to do something if something can be done, you know, after the waters recede, as they say. For us and the watershed group, and as far as mitigation goes, we're in the process of forming a river assessment triage team, kind of as a recommendation from the Mussel Shell and what they did after their 2011 flooding. So we're putting that team together and working with the Conservation District and RCS and some engineers, as far in addition to the watershed, and trying to get professionals and experts involved and help us prioritize projects on the river for restoration and cleanup. There's a lot of debris, roofs, logs, a lot of material in the river still that we want to get cleaned up. And so it's not an issue during log jams or during the next year's flooding, or even the ice jams of this winter. So we don't know what's going to happen. The river is a whole new beast right now. So there's a lot of questions, and we just want to get that cleaned up. But also Tommy has been organizing local nonprofit groups and to try to see the funding that they had for their disaster assistance, if we can pool that and make that money go farther when applying for grants and helping these landowners find in a financial capacity once we get some experts on the ground, and we have a direction for what these landowners need, then we have the money available to help them where they can't fill in those gaps. Moving forward, I guess from the government entities or any individuals, the watershed organizations that have been through this or have a good plan, you know, expertise is always needed. This is kind of a new ball game for us in the Stillwater. directions, funding alternatives, maybe from a smaller scale, and then how we can, in the long term, organize these groups so that we don't have to have this again. The next disaster, whether it be a flood again or a wildfire, we can get a plan together moving forward so we're a lot more efficient. And when we do this, Tommy, I'll hand it over to you and go ahead.
All right, thanks, Lindsay. I think you covered most of the, the main points for sure. Want to highlight that I think it was a great opportunity for us. We got an invitation, maybe some of you did too, to the Musselshell County Watershed Coalition, and they talked about, what's happened in the past decade there. And I think we learned a lot of things from them for the long term, right? I think there's the long term in terms of like the next year, but then there's the long term, like what does the next decade look like? And so we're kind of trying to tackle all of those things in some way. I think we've all said it to different extents. I think, Greg, you also said it, Lindsay just said it. There's kind of a lack of where do we plug in as watershed councils or community organizations when a community-wide disaster occurs? And VOAD, COAD was mentioned. I think, Greg, you also mentioned that. That's something we didn't know about really in Stillwater County, or we didn't have anyone participating in those kind of standing meetings, so that we would at least have people plugged into other resources and say, okay, what's going on in Park County, what's going on in Carbon County, and how do we plug into that? So I think for the next steps, longer term, we're looking at how can we identify a structure within Stillwater County so we're plugged into this VOAD kind of world, so that we have access to resources, or at least know who to contact when we have certain questions. So that's kind of a long-term thing. The other thing we learned also from Musselshell County was having a community structure to respond to a community-wide disaster, right? And we have DES, we have that structure that comes up in the immediate initial emergency response. But what we saw, and we're lucky to live in these communities where, Absaroka, Nye, Fishtail, all have community foundations that started raising money. The Beartooth Stock Association started raising money, and it started coming left and right, but then so that's the short term. Then there's this medium term. Well, who gets that money? How do we decide who gets that money? Who has the highest need? Because now we find, and this is kind of a gap that I see, we have people who have been assisted by FEMA because their primary residence was affected. Then they have these flood insurance issues they need to deal with. Then we have ranchers and farmers who didn't lose a primary residence, or people who live in subdivision-esque areas where there's no HOA for them to apply for a nonprofit kind of loan, where there's a bridge out. So then the question is, where do the funds come from? Is that a personal issue that someone needs to rebuild a bridge? Or what if you're a rancher? How do you plug into the USDA has a whole range of other things available that I can't even begin to dig through, because USDA is a huge animal. So those types of things. And I think our RAT team, like Lindsay mentioned, will be good in helping to identify that long-term, right? Like what are the needs on the river, and what are the government, private sector, and like nonprofit resources available that we can connect people to. And that takes time, fortunately or unfortunately. And I think probably Lindsay's great at, she's done a lot of grant writing in her life, so I'm gonna rely on her expertise. But any other tips, right, for what grants can we apply for at a community level with matching funds? We're in the process now. Hopefully at the end of October, we'll meet and see what funds our community organizations have available to kind of pool resources cross county, because the river affected everybody, not just the small communities along the river. So I think that's my 2 cents to that. Looking forward to talking more, and pass it along to whoever's next, Terry.
All right, well, that I believe covers everything. You said it was just the two of you for Stillwater County. So it sounds like everyone's had a chance to speak a little bit. Tracy, can your comment wait till the next portion, or did you have we were going to take a quick break?
I'm sorry, we had a meeting with Stillwater County this morning. We have touch points. So Stephanie asked me to speak on their behalf. And so I'll keep just specific to her comments, and then I'll throw some more comments in the agency. Really quick, some of the lessons learned between Stephanie and the emergency manager, Stephanie Ray is the planning director and floodplain administrator for Stillwater County. They only have 3 people that were on her staff at the time this event occurred, and they handled the sanitation. So anything dealing with septic systems and wells, as again, there's only 3 people in their office that were handling that. The county commissioners and emergency manager were all brand new when this event happened. And so some of the things that they struggled with is that some of the things that were mentioned, I think Serena did a good job of saying that they didn't know who to contact. They were behind the 8 ball, I think even far behind Park and Carbon as far as requesting assistance and who to kind of reach out to. They've done a good job about sharing resources, a lot of good comments coming out of the Corps and with the Conservation District about the sharing of information. Their biggest issues that they have right now are weeding through some of the permitting that's ongoing right now. They have close to 200 permits that are in the hopper. And so trying to get all those permits and time it with the requirements. They brought on assistance from KLJ, and then the state floodplain program is helping them tremendously and kind of helping them weed through that permitting process and helping those landowners. And of course, it's a long drawn out process. It doesn't happen overnight. And so trying to get back to these property owners, there's a lot of frustration. They don't know who to contact. And I think as Tommy was mentioning, everybody has a specific need, and some of them don't fall under certain programs and some of them do. So knowing how to reach out for those resources, Tommy did a really good job of laying out. We have property owners that are trying to do bank stabilization to protect their structures, and we have farmers and ranchers that are dealing with ag structures and a lot of bank stabilization. The biggest thing that we're seeing, that they're seeing long-term though, is there's been a lot of work. These property owners were desperate to get people in to do work for bank stabilization. And unfortunately, when we're inspecting the work, they didn't want to have engineers involved. And the problem that they're going to have long-term, and I think this is for all the communities, especially Carbon and Stillwater, is that the work that was done was not adequate. If they have a 10-year event, we're probably going to see more structures going into the streams, and that's going to be a big concern. So not only are they dealing with this, they're also dealing with what's going to happen because the rivers have changed so much. Now, the debris removal, they are working with DES. They actually do have, they have boots on the ground this week as they're evaluating those areas that they can actually do funding to do debris removal. And the criteria is looking at which areas pose the biggest threat to property and life. And they're trying to have to evaluate. So if you haven't been working with your emergency coordinators, we encourage you to reach out to them. I think that all of those visits are going through them. Serena and those guys might be able to provide some additional information. But long-term, just trying to discuss with individuals on what the new reality is on their properties and what the streams are going to do, and knowing from the Musselshell River and what we've seen, it's going to take years to kind of figure out where the river's going and how it's going to continually impact these property owners. So any funding that can kind of help anyone, they're looking for it too. I think they're trying to, from the floodplain and planning side, and from the county commissioners, are trying to find any assistance possible to help these individuals with their very unique situations. And so just trying to weed that through, and any funding that could be available. I think we've heard a lot with the bank stabilization and irrigation structures. I think that's going to be a big need.
Got it. Thanks for joining in, Tracy. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break just to allow everybody to quick stretch, use the bathroom if you need to. And we'll be back at 11:02. Looks like somebody just hopped on. We're just at the end of a quick break here, so we'll be restarting shortly. All right, is everybody back with us? I guess turn your camera on, please, when you're back. Wendy, you took your own break ahead of time. So yeah, it looks like folks are popping back on, and Sarah's going to give us a quick recap in a minute here of what we've just heard before we move on to the next part.
I can do that now, Terry, as people are coming back. Okay, thanks so much. It's great to hear from you all. Get kind of some insights from, you know, different local folks who have been experiencing this on the ground. Just a couple of things that I've been hearing. Certainly everybody has sort of brought up this challenge of just communication. And this is really across different levels, both within communities, with the public in your various counties, and thinking about communication with all of the variety of organized entities and partners at local and state levels. So that's, you know, obviously, understandably a big challenge. We've heard about this lack of community capacity for recovery with things like grant writing and just even distributing information to folks. And then Mark Bostrom, you know, helped us understand that that's not just something that's limited to communities, but is also being felt at the state level with dollars that come in and having to figure out how to get those on the ground. And even just this challenge of really knowing what resources are even available for recovery. As some of the emergency options kind of have passed, we have to start thinking more medium and longer term recovery. And we've been reminded by several folks that this is something that is ongoing and long lasting. And so making that shift from this immediate emergency to this longer term multi-year recovery is going to be very challenging. And then, of course, this great reminder that there are some issues that are not able to be addressed by existing funding programs, like small landowners and folks who just don't have this organizational umbrella to represent them as they're looking for funding. And then just a couple next steps, folks are, it sounds like across a couple watersheds are assembling or have assembled technical teams to look at river conditions, and they're out doing site visits, wading through permits and looking at funding opportunities. And this will continue for a number of years, sounds like. And then just, yeah, the emphasis on keeping up communication in terms of next steps at multiple levels. So on that note, I'll turn it back to you, Terry. Thanks.
Thanks for that wrap up, Sarah. So we're going to move on to the next part of our agenda here, which is kind of doing this just more popcorn style with the state agency people and funders, and certainly local watershed people, emergency response people, feel free to chime in as well. This is just more open, but we do want to hear, particularly now from agencies and funding people, just about your reactions and responses to this, and allowing us to kind of focus more on these overarching issues that are impacting everyone rather than just county by county. And I'll put those questions in the chat too, but just as a reminder, you know, sort of just let us know what your agency's primary response has been to the flooding. And then going back to what you heard, what opportunities exist for better communication and coordination with local communities, and then also focusing on what you've heard just now, what opportunities exist for better communication and coordination among other agencies, right? Not just with the local communities, but among the agencies themselves. So I'll drop these in here. And again, I'll just let people hop in as they wish.
Terry, a quick comment. I think it was probably in late June. You and I had some dialogue on lessons learned from other areas of the country. And you sent to me a very good lessons learned document from 2013 flooding of the Poudre River in Colorado. And it's largely, it was largely funded and produced by Colorado Water Commission and NRCS is my belief. Anyway, that is quite a document, and you might just send that around. When I take a look, number one, thank you for it, Terry. That was really good. And but what my assessment was is it wasn't so much rapid response; it was more long term, and the price tags that they quote in that at 2013 are probably double to triple now. So anyway, it's a good document as a reference, but it may not be all that applicable to our situation here. While it's a similar flood, sort of a biblical type of flood that reamed many drainages, we may not have the funding and infrastructure capacity capabilities that watershed had.
Yeah, thanks so much for that reminder, Jim. Sarah just put that in the chat. Yes, if anyone has any resources, we will save a copy of the chat and get that out to everybody. So put any resources in the chat. I don't have that one offhand, but yes, I will. When I send out the follow-up email, probably towards the end of this week with Bailey's notes and some other things, I can definitely include that document in there. Because yeah, you're right. That looks much more at the long term and it looks at things a little more holistically. I'll definitely do that. Thanks.
Well, since no one else is talking, I can jump in, Terry. So, yeah, so I deal with the ARPA grant, so the American Rescue Plan Act. Just so you guys know for context, Montana received about $400 million in ARPA funds that they chose to create, that the legislature chose to create 2 grant programs through House Bill 632 for water and sewer infrastructure. One of them being the competitive grant, which was $250 million, and then the minimum allocation grant, which was $150 million. That was divided between counties, cities, and incorporated towns based on the BARSA tax allocation. So each entity got a different amount. And last September, I believe it was, the Infrastructure Advisory Commission decided to set aside $10 million of the competitive grant funds specifically for agricultural improvement projects. So that application was closed in January. About 8.8 million were awarded. So that left about 1.2 million. And it was decided that the remaining 1.2 million from the commission, that it would go towards planning grants specifically for agricultural irrigation projects. But then the flooding happened, and the commission decided instead of that 1.2 million going towards the planning grants, that it instead would go towards projects to help folks recover from the flooding, and that it would be essentially, it would be a first come, first served basis. So there was, because we understood the sense of urgency, we spent pretty much all of July working on the application and the guidance, trying to do some outreach to folks so that they would know that this opportunity was available. and had the application live for folks to take a look at, just so they would know what kind of information we would need, what would be required. And then we had it go live August 1st. And that's when folks were able to actually submit their applications. And so ARPA was fairly unique just because we had kind of more flexibility with, you know, we were able to change what the funds could be used for. And part of that was just because the commission met monthly, and it was up to the commission to determine how those funds could be spent. It's very different from some of the other grant programs that are in CARD that are, you know, written in House Bill 6 and 7. So we, you know, tried to do the best that we could as far as being quick and responsive to folks. And I spent quite a lot of time, you know, just working with folks, trying to make sure that their application was correct, because we also felt the responsibility to make sure that these projects were well thought out, and that folks had an accurate understanding of what the costs would be, and that they weren't just, you know, throwing an application together just because of the urgency. So we tried really hard just to make sure that the projects were viable and that there wouldn't be any surprises down the road as far as, you know, what the cost of equipment would be, materials. So it was a little crazy just with the first come, first serve aspect. So yeah, we did the best that we could, and I'm happy to say that we were able to award that 1.2 million to projects. We were able to award 3 projects in August at that commission meeting. And then we awarded 4 projects at the September commission meeting. And that ask, what was awarded was actually 1.4 million. So the commission decided to use some remaining funds that were, it was basically just interest that accrued from the additional ARPA funds. So, because they understood the urgency of everything. Yeah, I will stop talking now and let somebody else talk. Or
Yeah, thanks for that information, Erin, and just, yeah, to also encourage people to to speak like specifically to those unmet needs that have been brought up, and just areas where we can all be improving our coordination and communication as well. Those sorts of things.
Nope, go ahead.
Let's see. Well, Terry, can I go next?
Good. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This Gus Byram, Department of Commerce, Outreach and Community Development. I am working with Betsy Ross and Sarah Hartley at DES, and we're going to put together some numbers for a possible congressional appropriation to meet unmet needs. Again, more the long term. And so, of course, if you have information on long-term unmet needs, our central conduit for information, again, is Betsy Ross and Sarah Hartley over at DES. And I was just at Mako last week, meeting with the county commissioners. I think we talked to all 7 county commissioners, or at least some of them, in the 7 presidentially declared counties. So again, it's very, very challenging trying to put together some numbers that possibly might, again, get into a federal appropriation, probably coordinated through HUD. And we will have to see what Congress says. Congress may restrict us just to helping conventional HUD program recipients, low and moderate income families, or they may grant us a broader waiver where we could step outside those low and moderate income parameters. So we'll keep you posted. But again, just appreciate all the information that's coming in and the fantastic efforts that everyone is making. Don't hesitate, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to give me a call. I'm at 406-841-2777. Again, 406-841-2777 here at Commerce. Thank you.
Gus, I just have a quick follow-up for you. Did you say you'd like folks could send ideas for unmet needs to Sarah Hartley or
yes,
Betsy?
that's fine.
Is that preferred? Like just send them an email or call them, or how is there any?
Yeah. They are our central conduit, Sarah, for information. And we know that this is going to be a huge challenge. Like I talked to the Sweetgrass County commissioners. Well, a big need they have is to replace the Vasquez Bridge over the Yellowstone west of Big Timber. That's long-term. It's going to be extremely expensive, but that's a good example of a long-term unmet need. And again, at this point, it doesn't look like MDT will come in and pay for that. That's primarily a county responsibility. So that's an example.
Yeah, thanks for that, Gus, and that clarifying question, Sarah. I see Greg Coleman has his hand raised, and just really quickly, I want to let everybody. Some people are already starting to do it, but we had that initial spreadsheet of everybody we've invited, and I know that there are more people on here. So if you weren't on that spreadsheet initially, please share your contact information, phone, email in the chat, and I'll save that and add it to the spreadsheet to send out to everybody along with Sarah Hartley and Gus's information. Greg, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to tag on to Gus's comment. And if you do mention unmet needs to the state, please clue your local DES coordinator in, because we need to be aware of unmet needs and things that are happening at the local level. That's all. Thank you.
Well, since there's a break and people that want to talk, I want to just change things a little bit and add my 2 cents. When we're on the ground, I'm meeting people, and I'd urge everybody to remember that these people are very emotional about what has happened, what they've witnessed, and how they see their future coming. There is a focus, I think, with this group on funding, and that is necessary. But there's also, when I deal with people, the one thing that I always hear is, I just want it back to what it was. Well, that's not going to happen. It's nature, things have changed, but the focus always seems to be, we've got to either restore it or stabilize it right away, and I just want it the way it was. So what I'm trying to do is convince people that, one, take the time. We have the 310 law, we have the 404 law, and we're not trying to regulate what happens. With the 310 law, it's actually more of trying to help people to make sure that they're not injuring somebody else downstream or doing something that's negatively going to affect the resource. And the other point that I try and make is that, don't run out and just do a knee-jerk reaction right away. Let's spend a lot of money to stabilize a bank. There's a lot of bed load and a lot of sediment that are still in transport, and they're going to be moving. And what you see as a problem today may not be a problem next year. And so trying to get some of these things just out there and immediately fixed may not really be the answer. Another one that is an issue that I've heard discussed here is large woody debris. I mean, if you're dealing with a refrigerator that came down from upstream out in your pasture, yeah, you need to take care of that. But as far as looking at log jams or wood pile up in channel, that may or may not be a bad thing. Sometimes that's a cushion to actually retard hydraulics that will come into play later. And from a biological standpoint, that large woody debris is a function of what's going on in that river. So while this whole issue with funding is occurring, we still have these laws that are incorporated in. And again, it's not to regulate. In some cases it is, but we're also there to try and help people and help them take a different look at things. So don't forget that you've got to get these permits before you get into this, into the action of things. And, you know, I can't emphasize enough that you get people, when you're dealing with them, they get so emotional because they've been impacted by this. And yes, as agencies and departments, you're overwhelmed by the number of things that are coming in, but these are individual people that are asking for help. And a lot of it is just monetary, but some of it is emotional. You know, we're not counselors, but we have to educate them on what's going on within the resource and how dynamic the whole system is. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I see John's hand up, and Tracy, I think you were maybe trying to speak earlier. I think we'll go with Tracy and then John, get to you next.
Great, thank you. From the floodplain program, we have two sides. One side deals with mapping, the other side deals with the community assistance. We've been working with communities even before this event happened, and of course, pretty entwined with them once this unfortunate event occurred. And we are still doing a lot of work with them when it comes to recovery. I'm glad that Buddy mentioned that there is a lot of education. We're dealing with a lot of property owners and we're seeing the same thing, this education. They really want to get out there and do these activities. But unfortunately, when we're trying to talk with them about the permitting, we're seeing a lot of stuff that has happened and has kind of caused some of the situations, especially when we're looking at when we kind of evaluated the damage that has occurred in most of these communities. A lot of it, either the homes were built before regulations were in place, or a lot of the ones that have gone down the stream, we found that they were built without actually getting permits. And that's the same thing with the streams, stream stabilization too. And people are going to spend a lot of money to hire somebody to try to make them normal. And if they take these shortcuts or they just take what they, what they can get at the time, I think it's unfortunately not only going to impact them financially now, but it could have detrimental impacts to them in the future as well. And so that's really hard working with those individuals. And in some communities, we're working directly with those property owners because we provide this need. If the communities are overwhelmed and they ask for state assistance or federal assistance, we're providing that that assistance to them. And with permitting, that's one of the things that we're seeing. When we're seeing what's going on nationwide, we know that they're going to start looking at a lot of the funding and saying, what happened here? Did they have permits? Was this house built in compliance? Was this activity or development done correctly, or did it exasperate the situation? And those things are going to start coming into play. And what I mean by that is recovery is long-term, and there's many phases that these property owners are going through right now when it comes to recovery, and that's long-term. And once they find out they don't have the means to, maybe they didn't have insurance, or maybe they don't have the means to kind of recover their losses, they'll start looking at other stuff to try to recoup that. And that what we see is a lot of times our lawsuits that are coming up. And during the mussel shell recovery, we were part of that as well. The other thing that we saw is homeowners not taking advantage of some of the grants out there. They were thinking like, well, maybe, with the mitigation grants, maybe they won't make me as whole as I was hoping. And those processes are very long. And if they don't jump on them, they miss that boat. And so I guess I would encourage property owners, especially the ones that are dealing with structures, working with our emergency coordinators to get them to kind of understand what's available now, because it could be years before another opportunity arises. And we are still, from 2011 mussel shell recovery, we are still dealing with property owners that did not jump on some of the mitigation grants that were offered, and they're still looking for that opportunity. And so it's really important to kind of get that word out to them and encourage them to work with those emergency managers or that community on that recovery. I'll stop right now. There's a lot of stuff that that's involved with what we're doing, and a lot of the great work that the communities have done. That communication key boy, I mean, Red Lodge and Stillwater County just knocked it out of the park with a lot of the communication after those events, especially with having such new individuals. Between Courtney and Stephanie Ray, they just really did a great job from the floodplain management perspective of trying to work with all the agencies and the different departments. I am going to turn it on over to Tiffany Leiden with our mapping side, because with the long-term recovery, the mapping that's going to be ongoing is going to impact everyone too.
Can we just trade before Tiffany speaks? Would it be appropriate for John to step in, or do you?
It's okay if Tiffany goes. It's in a floodplains.
Great.
Yeah, and then maybe John. Okay, so yeah, thanks. I'll be short. So, you know, the second part of our program is the community assistance Tracy talked about. And then really the part that I work with more is floodplain maps. And so, you know, all three of these counties had some pretty old floodplain maps. Those are really what the kind of the key tool that people use to really assess what's at risk of flooding. We did have a huge flood event, but now we have some pretty changed rivers. And so we have new areas that will be at risk in the future, and sort of getting some of that data is one of the things we're looking at is some of the long-term recovery. That's one thing we did that happened in the Mussel Shell after their flood event. That was a realization that their existing floodplain maps were really inadequate to really understand what's at risk and to kind of to guide future development and just kind of use of those areas. So that's one thing that we had just been in the beginning, or we were just about to share some draft information with Carbon County with flood studies to replace some of their really old information on Rock Creek and Clark's Fork. So we have paused that project right now and are just in the process of sort of reassessing based on all the changes in the river. So we did apply for some FEMA funding, just so folks know. And we are going to be reflying LIDAR for all three of those counties to really get some good data, and then start the process to do some updated flood study work to figure out what areas are at risk and get those eventually put onto new updated floodplain maps. Those processes take a long time, but that data will be, available and kind of part of this process. One thing, Terry, you asked to talk about is sort of opportunities for better communication and coordination with that. I think our agency has done a lot of coordination with the individual counties through the floodplain administrators and the commissioners, but I do see kind of a gap or an opportunity there to share this information with some of the watershed groups. I did meet with the Clark's Fork Yellowstone group in August to kind of share sort of that, but I think it would be good to expand that net a little bit and to share some of this information with some of the other watershed groups moving forward. That's all I've got.
Thanks for bringing us back around to that question of that better coordination, Tiffany. And John, just one thing, I know you've been waiting so patiently, but I just in case people don't know how to raise their hand, it moves you right to the top so that Sarah and I can see you. But you basically go, there should be at the bottom of your screen, it says reactions, and then it says raise hand. And so if you click on the spot that says raise hand, it has a little hand, it'll put you right to the top of the queue. Otherwise you can chat me or Sarah and let us know that you want to say something. So go ahead, John.
Awesome. Thanks, Terry. So once again, my name's John Lunzer. I'm hydrologist at the DNRC Water Management Bureau. Water Management Bureau's primary response was data collection. So extensive surveying, operation of gauges, and just getting every piece of information out of the flooding we could get. I think of in the context of today and kind of the lessons, we learned, I'm really glad you brought it up, buddy, but so as people going out collecting data, we're kind of first on the ground. And for a lot of these folks, we were the first people they saw, whether it was with the agency or not. And so the first thing is just, dealing with how emotional these people are and understanding that was honestly something I don't think we were prepared for. And realizing that, we're not just scientists, we're also, playing a support role where needed. On top of that, something we weren't prepared for is, we're kind of a conduit for information because those people are asking for help, information, where can we go? And we went out there, to go collect data. We did not even think about that at the beginning, that while being boots on the ground, we can kind of serve as a conduit for all this agency information, because being agency employees, we're much more tied in. And so in hindsight, I wish we had kind of taken advantage of that opportunity to, have handouts or, whatever we could get to help. So when we do run into these people, like, yes, we're doing science, but the fact that we're there and, people are waiting on the phone and stuff, having someone there for those folks meant a lot. So, I think for future events, just being like, hey, we're going out to do science, but we can convey all this information. And, it took me months to understand how kind of the funding and all the different agencies work. And so taking that understanding and having it right at the beginning, so when those people see you, you can, at least give them something to push them in the right direction, because some of them, would get on the phone and couldn't get a hold of anyone. And so that's kind of, I think, an opportunity for improvement, at least from Water Management Bureau.
Thanks for that, John. It's a good reminder. Jim, you had your hand up?
Yes. Terry, is there any way that maybe MWCC could put together a push system for funding opportunities that are focused on this issue going forward? Your website, I'm sure that a lot of people here have visited, but MWCC's funding links are very handy, but I have to admit, Terry, that I only go there once every couple of weeks, maybe. But if you had a push system that could keep people that are on here apprised of funding opportunities coming over the horizon, that would be great. And another one, Tiffany Lydon, she was a resource at one of our meetings, and she's fantastic. It's really good. I'd highly recommend her for Watershed Group keynote. But along that line, Tiffany, do you know if there's any, say, computing cooperative that would enable groups such as county level and watershed group levels to access LIDAR data? It takes a lot of muscle that we just, computing muscle that people at our level don't have.
Sorry, Jim, I don't have a great answer for that. Those are huge data sets. I know there's certainly been some little tiny LIDAR collections or other people doing things with drones. And so I guess I will say the state library did put together kind of a hub of data. And that is, I'll drop that in the chat if people aren't aware of that, but that's a good place to go to get the data. But in terms of sort of using it, I don't have a great solution for that.
Yeah, thanks. It looks like Sarah did just drop that state data in the chat. Thanks for that, bringing that up, Tiffany. And yeah, as far as using it, that's a different, I will say in terms of using it, the state library is actually fantastic about providing people, like even one-on-one, like you literally as a watershed group, as a CD, as a person can go to the Montana Natural Heritage Program in particular. I know it does a good job, but the state library generally, and just say, hey, we see you have this tool. Can you teach me how to use it? Or can you provide me additional resources that will help me to use it? And so I'll try to, I'll put a contact for somebody there in our follow-ups too. And to the point of MWCC providing specific funding resources and those sort of more immediate funding resources that are coming up for flood recovery, that sort of push system is, I'm going to be honest, is a little outside of our capacity and ability. But what I can do, and this is again a reminder for especially the agency people, well, anybody, everyone on this call, if you weren't on that original spreadsheet or you are not sure if you were on that original spreadsheet, please send me at least your name, your organization, and your email address in the chat, direct to me or to everybody, and I'll compile all that. And then if you could, and so I'll send that all out to everybody, but anybody on this call, if you have a funding opportunity, send that to me and I mean, I know it gets a little maybe annoying sometimes, but I do from time to time send out specific funding opportunities to people. And I could just create a list with everybody who was in this room, all the local partners, and say, hey, so-and-so just sent me this flood specific resource. That's probably the best that I can do, but it would be something, if people want to email that to me, and then we'll, of course, put it on our funding page, but I could also forward it specifically to the people on this call, unless anyone else has any better ideas for distributing that, but I'd be happy to do that. And I think Jason is.
Yeah, so I thought we're a little bit more off subject than others on this, but just as far as USGS efforts go, I think our techs can relate to what John was saying as far as being on the ground and being some of the first to interact with people. But our main efforts, for those of you who don't know what we do, was collecting data during the flood, before, during, and after the flood. So on the rising limb, the peak, and receding limb of the flood for all of our gauges along the Yellowstone and its tributaries. We also collected high water marks along communities, Fromberg, Red Lodge, and Livingston. And those are available on our flood event viewer. Those already have been published. Actually, I'm going to post that in the chat. So those were our crews just going out and marking high water marks, and we later came back and surveyed those so that FEMA can use those to verify inundation of people's houses or properties. We also collected data, high water marks. We did high water mark surveys, or at least flagged them, and then came back and did surveys for a lot of our discontinued gauges. So there were several gauges that were in the basin, such as the Boulder River, Contact, Stillwater River above Nye Creek, Rosebud Creek, Sunlight Creek, and Rock Creek at Rockvale. So these gauges are gauges that we previously had active, but have since been discontinued. And we use that data to make flood frequency estimates. So if we're trying to estimate the magnitude of a particular flood, 100-year, 500-year, these extreme events are particularly useful in getting those magnitudes as close to, especially when you don't have much data, right? When you have these extreme events, it very much limits the distributions that we use so that we can refine those estimates. So we did these at a bunch of gauges, and we're making we're calling indirect calculations because we weren't on site to make those measurements. So we're making indirect calculations on those magnitudes. And those can later be used to update flood frequency predictions. So these events were, as many of you know, at the sites where we did have gauges, they were nearly equal, and in many cases exceeding the previously estimated 500-year flood, in some cases by as much as 60%. So yeah, I just wanted to add that was what our activities were. Our technicians that Scott is coordinated worked really, really hard, and we're out there day and night making measurements to make sure that gauges that were operational were getting correct measurements, and those that were not operational and had been wiped out got repaired and had at least temporary equipment in place so that we could continue to monitor. And there'll be several presentations on the efforts and the magnitudes of these floods given at the AWRA conference here next week.
That's a good reminder. Thanks, Jason. And yeah, we're gonna, we've got some minutes here before we start moving toward some wrap up questions. And just a reminder, especially if anyone has, these resources are great, any resources, and also, again, more thoughts for how we can better coordinate and collaborate among all the agencies and local partners would be great too.
I'm going to chime in really quick. Yeah, I'm with the Upper Yellowstone Watershed Group, and I've been helping out with the Upper Yellowstone River Assessment Committee that we've formed post-flood. And we've been drafting a story map of BMPs for kind of land management practices and stream bank management practices for recovery efforts. And we have our next meeting this Thursday, and we're gonna hopefully finalize that. And I can share that with you guys if you guys think that would be helpful for other counties as well. Obviously, they're different systems, but you can still share that, and hopefully it'll be helpful. But that should be coming out here soon.
Yeah, thanks, Bailey. Feel free to pass that on to me too when it's ready, and I can send it out to the group. Any other thoughts on addressing some of the needs that have been brought up, or better coordination, or if any of the local watershed people have particular questions of agency and funder people, feel free to bring those up too.
I would bring up one point that's sort of a white elephant in the room for some of us that have been on the ground. This is DeWitt with the Park Conservation District is, I echo what Buddy said and some other folks about taking a deep breath and you're dealing with emotions. But the uglier side is that folks who are just doing things and already did things that are in blatant violation, and I don't have an answer for this, but just be aware that it's again a balancing act of, I don't think many of us here are in the enforcement business. We're supposed to be a source of help and regulation, but there is an enforcement or a lack thereof that is part of this process.
This is Greg in Park County. One thing that John Lunzer said that when he mentioned that he wished he had handouts to share, I'd like to build, I think that's a definite opportunity for us to do better next time. There was a number of assessments in the community by a number of local, state, and federal agencies. I have no idea how many assessments, but I do hear it from the landowners that are getting, especially since we were slow on the volunteer coordination rollout, they saw a parade of people come by their property assessing damage, and there was no assistance for them, or that's what they felt. So I know that we early on did with the county assist team, we did an early damage survey, and then there was a number of surveys afterwards, which I don't have access to. And so my survey was the first and the oldest data, and I'm still waiting on aggregated data from the state that is sort of de-identified of personal information. But I have reporters asking me this last week, what were the number of homes damaged? I don't have this information. So coordinating assessments so that we keep it as a minimum number of times that we have to go to somebody's property, perhaps coordinating those assessments so that we do have information. So if somebody came to me as the local emergency manager and said that I'm going out to do a survey of moderate to severe damaged properties, it just lets me know that they're active in the community, and then it gives me an opportunity to say, hey, if you see anybody, could you share this financial information packet with them? I think that we could be, without a lot of extra work and coordination, we can do a better job next time. That's all I got.
Thanks, Greg. Ooh, we've got three. I was just going to try to start to wrap us up here. But yeah, we've got Sage and then Aaron and Tracy. And then I do have just a quick, I want everybody to be thinking too in their comments about, kind of where do we go from here? Is there something that would be helpful moving forward? We've got a lot of ideas around here. Maybe that's good enough. Maybe we have, some more connections here and emails and resources going out. But if there's anything else specific that you're thinking of, be thinking about that for a wrap up. So we'll go with Sage and Aaron, and then Tracy, I think you had your hand raised, but let's go with Sage and Aaron first.
Hi, thank you. Yes, again, Sage Joyce, Army Corps of Engineers, Regulatory. And I was going to point to Jaren afterwards to talk about a couple of things that she's noticed in the permitting side of it, but So if you wanted to let the other two ladies go first, that'd be great, but either way.
Do you want to just go pass it to Jaren?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that I know caused some miscommunication on the Corps side is we had other parts of the Corps out there doing assessments, and our engineers came down from our civil works side. They were deployed under the FEMA. We had guys out there, Army Corps guys come for a debris mission, and unfortunately, I think that's one thing that caused a lot of confusion. And what I've heard back from other local entities is that, well, we already saw the Corps, they came and told us what to do, so we did it. And that didn't involve us on the permitting side of it. And so we are having a lot of things that we're having to follow up with and trace after for, work that was done without permitting. And right now, I can tell you across the state, I'm working at about 70% capacity with my employees. I have several, many open positions, and we're in pretty remote, not remote, but far off distance from a lot of these areas, and having trouble getting to them has been one of the problems. But that's why I appointed or had a PM kind of assigned to each one of the counties to act as the point of contact to help reduce the confusion on who to contact on our side. And Jaren has taken up the big lift on several of these counties, and Jade with Park. But Jaren's got some, just communication issues that she wanted to bring up. You want to go ahead, Jaren?
Yeah, so I have 2 points. The first one is, I know there are the multiple agencies that use the joint application in order to facilitate the applicant only needing to fill out the application once and submit it to multiple agencies. And I recognize we're all trying to get our work done and not wanting to try and lift, for another agency. But if whenever possible, you get a joint application from an applicant, if you can just briefly go over with them, at the top of the application, it lists all the other regulatory agencies that might have a hand in needing permitting. And if you can at all point people towards the U.S. Army Corps, we try hard to do that when we receive applicants, to say, hey, you may also need to stop by these other agencies. And we have our general line phone number that's always monitored by a project manager, and we have our general email inbox that's monitored daily. So we do try and get to any inquiries that are coming in. So that would be one kind of coordination thing that I would bring up, is just trying to point applicants to all the other regulatory agencies when possible. And then the second one is that we have had some misinformation that's been going out about the U.S. Army Corps and what would require permitting, what would not. It could be coming from all different kinds of sources. So I'm not trying to blame anyone about the misinformation, but if you ever do have applicants that are specifically asking about, what would the U.S. Army Corps say about that, if you can at all direct them just straight back to us, just so we can get ahead of any misinformation or stop. We already have a lot of inquiries coming in just because of the flooding, and it would help if we could staunch misinformation by just redirect back to the source. Those are my 2 points.
Erin, you wanted to add something? Thanks, Jaren.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to talk about it because I did not talk about it when I was blabbing earlier. Just from the capacity side, it was interesting just because, obviously, like everyone else, we were really strapped here at DNRC for capacity. So when we were trying to do the outreach for the flooding response grant, and then also just, the fact that folks could still use their minimum allocation grants for some of these projects, we relied heavily on organizations like the Montana Water Resources Association that work directly with irrigation districts. But then we also worked really closely with the Montana Association of Conservation Districts, and then the Conservation Districts Bureau, just to try and get the word out to conservation districts, because one of the requirements for the ARPA applications is that it had to be submitted by a local government. And so that I think was probably one of the biggest hurdles for that, just because they would have to either work with the county or conservation district or you know, even a city or town to submit that application. And you know, for a lot of folks, that was a really big ask, just because the counties and the CDs were already strapped. I mean, I honestly don't know how Sharon Flamentis is doing it right now with the EWP, and then, you know, being willing to sponsor several flooding response grants. So I know that there were a couple folks that were turned down. So that really hindered some folks to apply, just because it had to be a nonprofit water users association or irrigation district or partner with the CD or county. So I just want to say thank you to the CDs that were able to work with folks. And I know that Sarah worked really closely with the Water Users Association and helped them apply. But just a comment about the permitting too that came up. That was one of the things that we tried really to take a good look at when we were looking at the applications. Just that if the projects were already done, or you know what their plans were, that they were able to if they were already done, we wanted to make sure that we got some type of concurrence from agencies that what they did, you know, was you know, in line. And that was an issue for a couple projects, but you know, for the others, we just wanted to make sure that they had enough time budgeted and for acquiring all the necessary permits, and tried to at least guide folks to resources that would help them figure out what permits might be needed. But that's all I have.
Thanks, Erin, for sharing those resources. Tracy, I do want to give you a moment to speak, but we're running kind of short on times here. And so I don't know if Sarah, I could stay on for an extra 5 minutes to do a quick wrap up. I don't know if Sarah and Bailey are able to, or if anyone else is. I don't want to keep anybody else on any longer, but I'll just say we'll let Tracy speak. And if we don't get to it, I just we were talking about you know, we will be sharing out the notes from this conversation and all the resources that have been dropped in the chat. Anybody who has funding opportunities related to flooding, please send them to me and I can pass them along to the local coordinators. So just wanted to say that in case people need to start dropping off here. And then, yeah, Tracy, if you want to maybe move toward wrapping us up.
Sure, I'll try and make it really quick. I just want to thank Jaren and Sage for bringing that up with the permitting. I mean, that's one of the frustrations we're seeing with property owners right now across the board, is that there's so many permitting agencies that are requiring the stuff. Sharing that information and helping them through the process goes a long way. We'll be contacting a lot of, I know with Stillwater, we'll be contacting a lot of property owners and different agencies to kind of help move their permitting along here in the next few months, just trying to get those cleared. So yeah, I think we all have a duty that's going to help, just like the funding stuff. And Greg, right on that stuff about the coordination. Sarah Hartley and I tried very hard to get some of those teams that were going out to do the inspections to actually do them together. We tried to do individual assistance and the substantial damage stuff together. And you saw what happened in Park County, where when the other agencies, whether the federal agencies came in, the coordination fell apart. So, I mean, I do think that moving forward, trying to get your community, you know what you want to get done, control that as much as you can. We are going to be doing a tabletop exercise in March in conjunction with the Association of State Floodplain Managers for Montana. And it's going to be focusing on flooding and how to get communities more prepared. It'll be in Billings. I'll get the information out to folks, but we are working with DES on this. And it would be good to have the watersheds so that communities can actually share that responsibility, because these are confusing. This recovery, it is confusing and it goes on for years. And the quicker communities can get out ahead of it, the better they're going to be, especially with that, still that communication piece, getting out the property owners. And that's all I wanted to say. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Sarah, did you want to chime in here at the end?
Yeah, I can just do a super quick wrap up. I'd just like to say thank you so much, everyone, for taking your time this morning. I think this was a super valuable conversation.
Oh no, Sarah, you're frozen.
As Terry, oh, I'm sorry. Can you still hear me? Oh, yes, you can hear me. I'll just keep talking even if my video is frozen. But this idea of this congressional appropriation that Commerce and DES are working toward, I think that sounds super helpful to meet unmet needs. And we shared contact info for Betsy and Sarah with DES. We heard that agencies and partners are doing ongoing data collection, whether that's flying LiDAR to improve future floodplain maps, or like DNRC and USGS are collecting high watermark information and doing indirect calculations of flood magnitude. That's all helpful. We've heard, especially from floodplains, I think, if watershed groups are interested in hearing from floodplains about some of this work, I think they're very willing to come and talk. This is Tiffany and Tracy. And then heard this role for MWCC, in fact, to be sharing potential flood response and recovery funding opportunities as they're able. And overall, I just wanted to say, I think I've heard a lot of openness to and emphasis on better coordination across the board, with really specific, helpful ideas from Greg and Jaron. So thank you. We've also heard some really good ideas for next steps, like coordinated site assessments and really helping people better understand the permitting process and the importance of doing that from folks like Buddy and DeWitt, especially. Thank you. So I just wanted to say that hopefully you've maybe got some new ideas that you can kind of carry forward in your work, or at the very least, like I have today, maybe you've been able to put some names to faces. So we just encourage you to follow up across watersheds, with agencies, with other partners on the call, and with me and Terry. If you have other ideas, we can certainly add them to the summary from this webinar. And yeah, just thank you again for your time.
Thanks, Sarah. That was such a great, succinct little wrap up. I appreciate that. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Again, those reminders that I know you are all just intensely busy and probably different levels of overwhelmed by all of this stuff. And so I think this conversation was really important to get everybody together, and, you know, for all the reasons Sarah just articulated. Thank you all so much for being here. I will be sending out an email. Give me a week. There's a lot going on this week, but I will send out an email with all of those resources, and I will update that spreadsheet with everybody's contact information that I've gotten on this chat. And so we can all be in better contact. And yeah, as Sarah said, feel free to reach out. Thank you all so much, and have a good rest of your week. And thanks again, Bailey, for taking notes. So I didn't know if you, I guess we still have a few folks on, but if you wanted to catch up on any, you know, any thoughts, but I think that was I'm gonna stop recording right now.
And I just wanted to mention